Hi everyone, this is Courtney from Ruby Red Farm. Today I'm going to take you through making this delicious chicken gnocchi soup. So I've shared before that when we first started raising meat chickens, I was a little disappointed because I didn't know what on earth to do with a whole chicken. And so now, of course, I've completely changed my tune 3 years later. I can fix almost an entire week's worth of meals with a whole chicken from our family of 4. One of our absolute favorites, especially one of my husband's favorites though, is chicken gnocchi soup. So he was out of town this weekend and I'm gonna essentially be surprising him with his favorite recipe when he gets back home. Starting with the arduous task here of cooking this whole bird by simply putting it in the crock pot. This recipe is a copycat from Olive Garden that I found online. I will be sharing that recipe down in the description. Anything that calls for half and half versus cream, we always pick cream in this house. If you're wanting to get that really rich restaurant quality of soup, gotta go with extra cream. And this whole recipe starts with a really high quality chicken, which we happen to have on hand here. So I'll show you for the crock pot. All you gotta do for this part, I put about a ½ inch of water in the bottom, slide my chicken in, put it on low, and we just go about our day. All right, add my water. I'll add my chicken, any juices in there. I try to get those to go in as well. And I'm putting it in breast side down. Again, I'm gonna be cooking this on low for about 6 to 8 hours. In our case, it'll be about 6. We're gonna head to church, have a nice relaxing Sunday, and then probably about 3 or 4 this afternoon, I will get going on turning it into the actual soup recipe. So here is the whole bird in the pot. No seasonings, guys, not yet. Just letting it cook. So that'll be on low. Putting that on low for the next 6 hours. All right, guys, it's been about 6 hours now, so right on the early end of this chicken being done. I'm gonna go ahead and remove it from the crock pot and get it cooling down. While it's cooling down, then I'm gonna go ahead and shred my carrots. So let's get this out of here first. I like to use a spatula, but it's still not perfect. That's the best that's ever gone. Go ahead, let that cool down so it makes it a lot easier for me to shred. I'm gonna work on the carrots for a minute. So I just went out and dug these up out of the garden. To shred these carrots, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the tops just to get them out of my way. And then you do wanna have some kind of a large shredder for this. It's really difficult otherwise. You can use a peeler. I have used a knife before and just cut it lengthwise and chopped them. But to get a true shredded carrot, you really do wanna have a nice grater for this step. Cut the tail off. These have been washed but not peeled. God made dirt, dirt don't hurt. It's not gonna hurt anything. Alrighty. In case you're wondering, yes, it really does hurt when you hit your finger on this grater, so be very careful. I'm gonna go ahead and get the other 2 done. This will be ready to go. And there we go. So we're going for about 1.5 cups of shredded carrots. This may be 1.5 cups to 2 cups, but I like carrots, so that's fine. All right, now that the chicken has had a chance to cool off, I'm gonna go ahead and shred it. Before I shred it, I am gonna go ahead and clean out anything solid. It's typically just bits of fat and skin that have kind of solidified, but they just don't quite taste or feel quite right when you're trying to eat soup. So I'm gonna clean this out, get it down to being just broth. That way, as I shred this chicken, I can put the chicken straight into my pot. Just going through and getting as much of this out as I can. Look at that nice fat that we got in our broth. That's exactly what you want. You're not gonna get that from a store-bought chicken. Our birds are pasture raised, and so they've just got a lot better, quite frankly, tissue quality, which I know sounds weird, but their muscles are healthier. And then the fats that they have also are just a healthier amount of fat. Looking at this whole batch here, you've got a lot of just really nice amount of fat in this broth, which of course is gonna make for a tastier soup. Okay, that is ready now, and we're gonna go ahead and go back to my chicken. So as I've shown before, my hands end up really being about my favorite method for this. It has cooled down some, but still has some heat to it, of course. I'm just gonna get started. Because it's been cooking for 6 hours, this just pulls right apart. I am putting good chicken this time. right back into the crock pot for my soup. And then any bad pieces, which again, we don't end up really keeping the skin typically. The skin, the fat, any bones and ligaments in that are all gonna go into my scrap bucket, which we end up feeding to our pigs. And they love it. So I'll speed this up. I won't make you watch me shredding a chicken. Just know though that you're gonna get a lot more meat out of this, obviously, than you would out of just a bulk pack of chicken breasts. You just gotta work a lot harder for it, but it is much tastier. A whole chicken, the meat is also gonna be more fatty, which fats kind of get a bad rep, but when they occur naturally like this, they're actually far better for you than any of the oils and things that they're sneaking into most of our food these days. So I would much rather have a chicken that was raised humanely and in a healthy way and get good healthy fats from it than eat a lot of processed food that has, again, oils and different fats snuck in there that don't belong. These fats belong, and we've been eating them for a very, very long time. All right, I've got work to do. We'll speed this up, maybe put it to some fun music here. All right, I always say the chicken breast for last because I'm always worn out by then. So these are the easiest. I always laugh when I make chicken soup now thinking about Campbell's chicken noodle soup when I was a kid. And those teeny tiny little weird pink chunks that were in there. You were like, yes, chicken. And now I'm going, what was that? And why were they allowed to call it chicken noodle soup when there was about a quarter size amount of chicken per an entire can of salt? Makes me laugh. This is actual chicken soup and it tastes so much better. In general, I try to shred and add in all of the soup ingredients about an hour and a half to 2 hours before I'm going to be serving it. That gives the carrots time to cook and it gives the flavors a chance to kind of mix and make the chicken taste a little more Italian. That's why I don't bother putting any seasoning on the chicken at the beginning. In my mind, it truly is just an ingredient. Then it gets to marinate and do what it needs to do for the hour and a half to 2 hours after I add everything else in. All right, chicken shredded. Moving on. First things first, I'm gonna go ahead and add those carrots. So again, I had about 1.5 cups of carrots here. Okay, next I need garlic. You can use either actual garlic cloves, or for me, I'm just gonna use powdered garlic. I'm gonna end up adding actually about 1 tablespoon. This again is supposed to be a pretty Italian recipe here, so you want the garlic to be pretty strong. We're big fans of garlic. So again, about 1 tablespoon of garlic. I'm gonna go ahead and add just some Italian seasoning. You can break this down and do parsley, basil, do it separately. I prefer to just do the Italian seasoning, make my life easier. I'm gonna go ahead and do 2 teaspoons of this. And I may add later depending on the taste. Can add about 1 teaspoon of salt. So there's my salt. About 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. Recipe calls for about 1 cup of half and half. I'm gonna actually be using 1 cup of actual cream. For the record, we had already used half of this for something else. So there's only about 1 cup left in here. So 1 cup of cream. And then the original recipe calls for about 5 cups of chicken broth. Because I made a whole chicken and it created probably about 3 cups of broth, I'm just gonna add 2 or 3 cups of broth here just to bring that water level up above the rest of the items in the soup. There we go. And again, keep in mind I can always add more later if I need to. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a nice big stir now. Man, that smells delicious already. So we're gonna go ahead and keep this on low and continue letting it cook then for about 1.5 hours to 2 more hours before I'm adding any other ingredients. Now for the fun part. I'm actually gonna go ahead and make this gnocchi by hand today. I have never made gnocchi before in my life. Typically, I would just buy a frozen package from the grocery store. Of course, you can do that. We happen to have some fresh potatoes right now, and so I thought I would give it a try. I've always wanted to try actual homemade gnocchi. So bear with me, but we're gonna try gnocchi together for the first time today. If this is not for you and you're thinking, this is already gonna take my entire day to make this meal, just buy the store-bought. That's what we've done for years, but I was curious and figured I'd give it a shot. All right, so if you're not familiar, gnocchi is essentially a potato dumpling, if you will. And so the first step is to make mashed potatoes, not in the traditional sense with all the added ingredients, but you're gonna boil and mash up your potatoes, and that's the first step. So I'm gonna go ahead and get potatoes I have here peeled and ready to go into the boiling water. Got my water going. I'm gonna go ahead and just use the same scrap bucket as before because the pigs will like potato peels as much as they like chicken scraps. I'm gonna go ahead and peel about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of potatoes here. I happen to have mostly red potatoes. I have seen online that that's one of the better ones to use because they're more firm, which makes sense. But I had a rogue yellow one in there, so we'll go ahead and use it too. You can, of course, use a potato peeler. I prefer a paring knife. This is a recipe that even in another year or two, I probably would let my daughter make, or at least help me make. She's actually gotten pretty darn good with a potato peeler, and I know she loves to shred carrots, so. Turns out I pretty much like any type of carbohydrate dumpling that you want to create. I'm probably gonna enjoy it. I think this will end up being plenty. Truly with this soup, the broth being so creamy and the amount of carrots and chicken in it, the gnocchi is almost kind of just an added bonus. It's not necessarily a vital ingredient. It obviously is in the name, so we want it in there, but it's not like you have to get a bite of gnocchi in every single bite of soup for it to taste right, if that makes sense. The best parts about having pigs and chickens is that no food goes to waste around here. All right, we'll wait on this water to boil and we'll get our potatoes going. You know, they say a watched pot never boils. We might be here all day. I looked away for 1 second. We'll go ahead and add our potatoes here. Get them boiling. We'll let those boil for about 10 to 12 minutes. All right, so that ended up taking more like 16 minutes to boil. So once they're boiled, you're gonna go ahead, drain them, of course, and then mash your potatoes up. They do not have to be perfect, but you do wanna get them into very tiny bits here. If you've never used a masher like this, I'm a big fan. I use it for meat and potatoes. It works really well. All right, that looks good. I'm gonna let that cool off, and while I do, I'll get my flour ready. All right, so on a clean surface, I'm gonna take a cup of flour. We prefer to use whole wheat flour, so this is white whole wheat flour. So I've got my flour, I'm gonna dump it on the table here. I need another teaspoon of salt. And then the recipe calls for just mixing that in to your flour here. Now it's gonna get mixed in quite a bit as you go. So again, doesn't have to be perfect. There's that. Now I'm gonna make a well. A well is just kind of a dent right here in the middle, enough to catch what I'm gonna be adding to it here in a minute. So there's that. I'm gonna add a medium egg. We happen to have quite a few of those hanging around. I'm gonna go ahead and put my potatoes with it. So I've let that cool down enough. Now I just need to mix everything together and make this into a dough. It's another job I feel like my kids would really enjoy. But since it's the first time making it, I'll be the test dummy here. I'm just kind of folding, squeezing, pressing, basically just mixing, combining everything together here. You do want to let those potatoes cool enough that you can handle them. These are borderline, not gonna lie. Pretty hot. All right, I am gonna go ahead and add just a little bit of flour. That was a little bit too much on the potato side, but with making such a big soup, I wanted to make sure I had enough. So again, you'll have to kind of just see the texture of how yours turns out. Mine was, again, just a little too sticky, so I'm adding just a couple tablespoons of flour, just to get the texture a little bit closer to what I'm going for. Trying to mash the last little bits of potato as I go as well. All right, once I've added enough flour that I'm happy with the texture there, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the table so that it doesn't stick. Again, a little bit onto my dough ball here. Kind of has the feel, honestly, of a pie crust at this point. What I'm going to do is just kind of break this into smaller sections here. Again, get it nice and floured. Roll this out till it's all right about the same width. Just kind of spreading my fingers as I go. Trying to get it down to about 3/4 of an inch. Once you have that, then you're going to go through and cut these into what you'd think of a gnocchi looking like. Little 3/4 inch to 1 inch chunks, effectively making a little nugget. You are trying to get them to all be about the same size so they cook at the same time. I'm going to go through and just put a little bit of a dent on there. This is more for looks, but it's also going to help keep everything together. I do have some water started boiling back here so that can be ready when I'm ready. All right, I got my nice long snake. Try with the fork this time and see if it goes any better. About the same. What, babe?
How do you make it?
This is called gnocchi.
Gnocchi?
Yep.
Oh.
So this has made a lot more than I thought it was going to, which is nice. I've got just 2 more chunks to go, so I'm going to go ahead and just finish it out here. The first couple that I made were way too big, and I'm kind of getting the hang of it as I go here. So definitely trying to get this rope on the smaller side, more like a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, so that when I go through and cut it, it doesn't smush as much and it just kind of has a nicer ratio, if you will. So again, trying to get this relatively small. This kind of just takes practice, this rolling out part. So again, normally I just buy a bag of gnocchi. You can see why it would save, you know, 1/2 hour's worth of work. This happens to be a nice lazy Sunday where I had some time and I'm taking some days off work this week. So knew that I had plenty of time to mess with this today, but normally I would just buy it. I may honestly look into a nice way to freeze these, because if I can make these ahead and freeze them myself, I might just have a day where I make a bunch of gnocchi, get it in the freezer, and then we honestly love this soup. We would probably eat it about once a month. But my excuse is that we don't have gnocchi on hand. Well, now I know how to make it, so this is kind of dangerous. The best part is it's our potatoes, our carrots, our chicken. One of the biggest reasons we got into all of this from the get-go was to try to get more self-sustainable and grow as much of our own food as we could. That's pretty exciting to be able to make something like that. This is a nice soup. I've done it before that you can kind of make extra and freeze it if it's just not soup weather, which to be fair, it's about 90 degrees today, so I have no idea why I decided I wanted soup, but it just sounded really good. So it is going to cool off later in the week. I don't think my husband's going to care what the thermometer said. He's going to eat it no matter what. It's his favorite. And there you have it. My take on gnocchi. So now you do have to cook these just to get them to solidify really. So I'm going to put them into the boiling water back behind me here. And then we will put them straight into the soup. So here we go. In case you're wondering, boiling water is hot. I know that's groundbreaking information. All right, once they're all in there, I'm gonna get that boiling again. I'm gonna go ahead and add about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt here. And in general, these are ready when they float to the top. I'm gonna kind of stir these and just make sure that they're all cooking pretty evenly here. Keep in mind all the ingredients are essentially done cooking. We're just trying to make sure that they've got almost a crispiness to them so they don't fall apart in the crock pot. All right, there you go. I made gnocchi. I'll do a lot better job next time, but for the first time ever, I'm actually pretty happy with that. Make sure they're nice and drained, and then go ahead and add them back into our soup. A little funny shaped, but they got the right texture. We'll go for it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just add these back into my soup, which again has been cooking on low for the last hour or so while I figured out how to make gnocchi. Oh my goodness, guys, you have no idea how great this smells. Just fabulous. So that's my soup. I'm gonna add my gnocchi here. Again, the whole wheat flour definitely gives it a different look, but it's got the same texture and the same flavor. Once you've added your gnocchi, whether that's from a bag or homemade, you're gonna let that all simmer for close to another half hour or so, just to, again, kind of get the flavors into that gnocchi. And then right before we serve it, we will add the spinach. All right, for the final ingredient, I got just a bag of spinach here. I'm gonna go ahead and chop this up. This looks like a lot. It shrinks down significantly. So I'm gonna be using most, if not all, of this bag here. I do like to chop it up a little bit. Otherwise, you just get some really long, stringy pieces, which, again, when you're eating soup, isn't necessarily pleasant. We'll go with about half a bag to start and go from there. I'm gonna add this straight to the crock pot. This is the last step. You basically let these simmer for about 3 minutes, and then it's time to eat. Oh, we're gonna go ahead and do the whole bag. This really is a pretty nutritious soup. It has a ton of calories because of the cream, but again, you're getting really good fuel in the process. So it's not, I don't really see foods necessarily as good or bad. I see them as better and not quite as good for you, but I'm not gonna ever say full out that a food is just flat out bad for you typically, especially when it's something that's effectively a raw ingredient like cream. You can eat things that taste good and it's okay. And again, it's gonna have a huge calorie count when you really look at it, but you're also getting so many good nutrients from the spinach, the carrots, the broth from that whole chicken, all sorts of goodness in this soup. And I'll show you just how much that shrinks up once you mix it in. All right, so you got your spinach. You're just gonna kind of smush it down in there, get it covered up. It's gonna wilt, and it will do so in pretty dramatic fashion here. So as soon as it heats up, you can see already that whole big bag of spinach pretty much disappears. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of it. All right, so there you go, 1 whole bag. That's a 5-ounce bag, by the way. Adds a lot of nice nutrients to the soup, so it's definitely worth putting it in there. Plus, it just makes it a little more eye appealing. Get a little color contrast going on. We will let all of this kind of settle in for about 2 more minutes, and then I will do a taste check. I typically do end up adding a little bit of salt at the end, but I like to wait until everything has had a chance to combine. A lot of times I'll add salt just to my bowl, because my husband does not like to put as much salt in his food as I do. So we will let that continue simmering. It is almost ready to eat. All right, here's our finished product. We've got, again, nice bits of gnocchi that are with whole wheat flour, so they're a little bit darker. You've got the shredded chicken throughout here with the carrots, nice creamy base, and then some super healthy spinach added in. Let's see what we think here. Oh my gosh. I always forget how much I enjoy this soup until I actually get to eat it. Let's try some gnocchi again. This is homemade. I've never made it before. Let's see how I did here. It actually tastes like gnocchi is supposed to taste. So it's got the perfect texture. I'm shocked because if there's any Italians watching, I'm so sorry for how much I've butchered that gnocchi. I've never made it before. My family's Irish, okay? And his is German. But that is actually fantastic and actually tastes a little better than the store-bought version. Imagine that. So, huge hit at our house. I'll see what he has to say. Couple pieces of advice: if you do use half and half, I would add some cornstarch to thicken the soup a little bit. You can always do that too if you use the cream and you're not happy with the thickness. At the end, I always end up, like I said, adding a little bit of salt. You can kind of just use salt and pepper at the very end to taste, just to make sure that it's got that zip that you're looking for. This keeps really well. We usually keep it in the fridge up to 6 or 7 days and it tastes completely fine. If anything, it tends to taste better on the second day, like a lot of the soups that I make. But all in all, again, absolutely love this recipe any time of year. It actually has enough freshness to it that it makes a good summer soup, but we eat it year-round around here. If you have done this recipe and have something you would change, please leave a comment. If you are Italian and have an opinion about my gnocchi, if you have made gnocchi before and have advice for how I can not be quite as bad at making gnocchi, I would love that advice in the comments. We do a lot of videos along these lines. I try to throw in a cooking video every now and then to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into real life on the homestead. Please subscribe for more. Again, hit like or comment if you got anything fun to say. I'll get his reaction, but for now, this is Courtney from Riverbed Farm signing out. I hope you all have a great day. Hi.
Hi.
I made you a surprise.
What'd you make? Is this your chicken gnocchi? Smells fantastic.